Okay, so let's have a look at how you actually read your RIB reports. You will receive each month a monthly report from RIB with your results on it, and there are several pages of it, and this is what the pages look like. First of all, top right-hand side, it tells you that this is the monthly index. You'll understand why that is drawn as distinction against something in a minute, and that it is industry-wide. In other words, this is your result against the rest of the index, the whole index, because we are also able to do sector-specific reports where you're measuring yourself against the sector in which you operate, if there are enough of you to measure it. We then have the name of your company up on the top left-hand side. It says RIB Limited Air. That, of course, will be your company name. And this is measuring those items of the criteria of the report concerned with margins. So this is the margins page. There are pages for 7 pages covering the 35 criteria that we have, with varying numbers in each. They're not all 5. Indeed, this one is 6, as you can see. And you have this bar chart across the top, which I'll explain in a moment. But here you've got your actual results against the criteria identified here, and how that actual result is ranked against the rest of the industry in the index. Take one at a time. Let's just take this top criteria. Criteria number 8, which is this one, is temporary margin as a percentage of temporary turnover on a rolling quarter basis. And in the sample size, there are 153 in the index who've reported on that figure. What you have achieved in this case is 22.97% as your temporary margin. And out of the sample size of 153 companies, that ranks as 58%. In other words, with the weakest being 0% and the highest being 100%, you came in at 58%, which is clarified on the bar chart there. These other numbers here are very important, and you need to understand them. They first of all show the lowest number in that sector, on that criteria. They show the highest in that criteria, and they show the median, the lower quartile. Now, what you need to understand, these are not averages. And you'll see why and how that is in a second. Because the median is not the average number, it is halfway along the range of numbers received. And consequently, the median is actually 50%. And as you can see, 21.78, you were at 22.97 and actually came in, therefore, at 58%. To explain that, if you imagine that there was a measurement for salaries received by the residents of a street, average 50,000. And Richard Branson buys a house in that street and is going to receive 2 million. Now, the average of the salaries in that street will obviously jump very considerably because of the input of the 2 million. But the halfway point is hardly going to vary because there's just one very extreme number in it. So the difference between median and average is that median is halfway along the list, average is the average of the contents of the list, and is not what we measure. So you've got your lowest at 0 and your highest at 100. And to make it clear, and we'll come to it in a minute, you'll understand why, we add to that weakest and strongest. And it's to do with this thing down the bottom, but we'll explain that in a moment. The lower quartile is at 25% and 75%. In other words, a quarter of the way along the list and 3/4 of the way along the list. Your rank, your actual, and where is the median? The purpose of having those just highlighted there is because apart from your monthly report, you also receive a historical analysis, which looks like this. Now, in this case, we're no longer in the same criteria. We're on a different criteria now. We are on criteria in the group of sales. It's number 15, and it's turnover versus last year as a percentage on a rolling quarter basis. And in the historical analysis, on this top side, you're measured actual against median, with the median in the blue line, which goes back for a few years, of the industry index as a whole, because we're still industry-wide. If it was sector-wide, then it would only be whilst there was a sector operating. There's the median over that period, and of course, in this case, your company has come in and started just in January 2010. And your green line measures you against the median, and as you can see, there's an immediate improvement on it. So that has shown how you historically, over time, the trend, if you like, you have established, rather than just a monthly snapshot. Below that, there is your ranking, and that is clearly it starts at 0 because you didn't have a rank to start with, and you work your way through, showing how your ranking has improved over time or not. So the trends are clearly identified in the historical analysis. I'd like now to just cover one final point, and that is that I referred to earlier those criteria which have an asterisk on them. Now, these are what we call inverse ratios. And the inverse ratio criteria are those where the lower the number, the better, as opposed to the higher number, the better. And we've chosen to clarify that for you by taking the grouping of criteria under the heading of finance, where in fact there are 3 in the group, and all 3 of them have an asterisk on them. And in this first item, an example there, the debtor days, you can understand that the lower the number of debtor days, the better. We don't want, therefore, the lowest number to look like a bad performance. Consequently, where there's an inverse ratio, and where we therefore have an asterisk, we simply reverse the measurement on the ranking. Consequently, 29.39 is very good, much better than the median of 39.37. And in the sample of 80 who have done this criteria and measurement, the ranking goes to 76. So the lowest is the highest number because it is the weakest, and the strongest is the lowest number. So we reverse them. The median, of course, remains exactly the same. It's still halfway through the list. And the quartiles also will reverse, so that what was 25% along the list becomes 75% and vice versa, here to here, so that we're showing it as weakest to strongest, which is why we've got that at the top. Every time, just looking at your bar charts, the weakest is the bottom end on the left, and the strongest is the right-hand end on the right. So, hopefully, that'll give you a better clue as to how to read your RIB reports.